Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gyles Brandreth, and I'm honoured, excited, delighted to be here. If you are wondering why I am here today, then already we have something in common. I'm here because I am a devotee of the Master and have been ever since I was a little boy. And I saw him on stage, it must be said, when he made his last appearance in the West End in Suite of Three Keys. My mother took me because she was devoted before I was. Her role model in life was Celia Johnson, and as it should be if you are any lady at any time. And she took me to see those three plays, the double bill and the single play, and we saw his last appearance on the West End stage. And later I got to know particularly Graham Payne, and spent some time at Les Avants in Switzerland, and regularly go to Jamaica to be a pilgrim at Firefly. I'm sure all of you go to Jamaica most winters, at least in your mind's eye. If you haven't been, do go, because as you know, it's the last resting place of Noel Card, and if you stand by his grave, you feel close to him because you are, but also you get that wonderful view looking out over the beautiful blue water, and you can see why he wanted to be there. And also, you can again see the simplicity of the house. One of the things that struck me most when I first went there and when I went to Les Avants was actually how straightforward it all was. And I think we're dealing here with the most remarkable human being who was, as well as being the great genius that we celebrate, a delightful person, and an easy person, and a nice person, which is wonderful. So here we are, 117 years on from the birth of Noel Card, back in December 1899, on the 16th, as you know. Thinking back to what he would have been doing this year, 100 years ago, I was alarmed to discover that he'd already appeared in about 8 different theatres in the West End, although he was only 16, 17 years of age. As you will know, he appeared first under the auspices of Charles Hawtrey, the great light comedian and actor who gave his name, though he didn't know it, to Charlie Hawtrey, the carry-on star, who took the name Charles Hawtrey from the great Charles Hawtrey. And Coward used to claim that it was Hawtrey who told him everything he needed to know about light comedy in about 2 weeks that he played with him. And Coward first appeared with Charles Hawtrey, and I think his second appearance in the West End, that was at the Garrick Theatre. His second appearance in the West End was at the Savoy, in a show where Coward, aged 14 or 15, only danced. The idea, I just love to have seen him dancing age 14 or 15 down at the Savoy Theatre. But those were the days, and it was before he even appeared in Peter Pan, which I think is about 1913, 1914. He makes his first appearance in Peter Pan. He does Where the Rainbow Ends first, which I saw as a child. Anyone else here seen Where the Rainbow Ends? They used to do it regularly at the Scala Theatre in the 1950s as an alternate to Peter Pan. Well, so clearly I'm one of the last survivors of seeing the regular production of Where the Rainbow Ends. But he then moved into Peter Pan, and as you know, he famously played the role of Slightly, as Kenneth Tynan liked to say and said more than once. In 1913, Noel Coward played Slightly in Peter Pan. He's been playing wholly in Peter Pan ever since. So it's an extraordinary life that we are celebrating. 100 years ago, this 16-year-old boy was already established as a West End figure. In this particular year, 100 years ago, he appeared not only in a revival of Peter Pan, his second appearance in it, but he also appeared on tour in Brandon Thomas's Charlie's Out. So he was really absolutely feeling himself into the mainstream. And then he went on to create this extraordinary career that has brought all of us into the foyer of this theatre here today. Such an extraordinary career. As a playwright, as an actor, as a film star, as a composer, as a lyricist, as a cabaret entertainer, and as a self-invented character. and wit. And I admire the wit of Noel Coward hugely. I admire the spontaneous wit. One of my favourite stories is the one where he is shown or sees that notable photograph of W.H. Auden. You will remember W.H. Auden had that terribly lined face, and there's a famous photograph taken of Auden towards the end of his life, and Auden's face is crisscrossed with lines. It looks like sort of Clapham Junction. There are so many lines covering his face. And Coward looks at this picture of W.H. Auden and his lined face and says, yes, and imagine his scrotum. Well, to get such a laugh out of 3 words, I think you need to be Noel Coward, don't you? And my favourite Coward story, and when my wife and I hope my wife will be here in a moment, because I think she is the last person at Les Arbres to actually have sat in the chair with the wings behind her. And we have a photograph, which we haven't yet framed, of her sitting in that chair with the wings behind her. We told Graham, who was razor sharp, he'd given up drinking by then, we told him a number of Coward stories. We tried to compete with Coward stories. And I kept telling him stories. He said, oh, I don't recognize that one. And I want to raise this issue with you. The one that he claimed not to have heard, I couldn't believe he hadn't heard it, is the famous one concerning the production of Titus Andronicus in 1955 at Memorial Theatre, Stratford-upon-Avon. You will all know this story, so feel free to join in with the punchline. It's a production of Titus Andronicus. This is the season where Laurence Olivier and Vivien Leigh are appearing in Stratford. Vivien Leigh is quite nervous because though she is a world-famous movie star, Laurence Olivier is perhaps known as the stronger actor on stage, so she is quite apprehensive. Probably has no need at all, but that is the way she is. And they're doing this play, Titus Andronicus. She is playing Lavinia. You will recall Lavinia is the unfortunate character who in the play is ravished, assaulted, and in order that she cannot reveal who her assailants has been, she has her tongue ripped out, and she cannot speak who her assailants were, and she has her hands chopped off so that she cannot write their names. I agree, madam, you're quite right to look a little bit squeamish. A shocking piece. Shakespeare just didn't know when to stop, did he? Anyway, so this is the drama. Lavinia is ravished, her tongue is ripped out, her hands are cut off, but the play ends not actually happily, but at least she is able to name her assailants, because with a stick that she holds between her arms, she is able to write the names of her assailants in the sand. And this is a critical climax to the drama. Well, on the opening night, Noel Coward is there in the stalls. There is an array of familiar faces. Rex Harrison is there, Johnny Mills is there, they're all there. And of course Noel is there as well, and the Oliviers are giving this Titus Andronicus. And nervously, Vivien Leigh comes on for this telling scene where she is to write the names of her assailants in the sand. Her tongue has been ripped out, her hands have been chopped off, she is holding the stick between her forearms, and unfortunately as she comes onto the stage in her nervous state, the stick slips her grasp, clatters to the stage, and there is quite a rake, or used to be, on that stage in the 1950s, and the stick rolls down the stage and plops into the orchestra pit, ruining the climax of the drama. After the performance, Noel Coward famously appears at Vivien Leigh's dressing room, pushes open the door and says, "Tut, tut, butter stumps." Now the point of this story, ladies and gentlemen, is it true? Because Graham said, well, I've not heard that one before, it's very good. He said, did you invent it? I said, no. He said, a lot of people do invent Noel stories. And this is the dilemma that I'm currently faced with, because my wife and I are editing the Oxford Book of Theatrical Anecdotes. And obviously, Coward will have a proud place in this book. But because it is an Oxford University Press book, every anecdote has to have an original source. It can't just be an amusing story told to me over the years by Ned Sherrin or Sheridan Morley, delightful as their stories may be. It actually has to have been recorded at the time, or close to the time, by somebody who was there or who knew the principal participants. I mention this because you will all know the famous story of the coronation and the Queen of Tonga and the little man in front. That is her lunch. We all know that. We all know that. But what is interesting about that story is that it isn't recorded at the time as being said by Coward or indeed by anybody else. In his diaries, Coward makes no mention of it. Other people's diaries, lots of records of the coronation. Nobody is telling that story at the time. It doesn't emerge in print until about 10 years later. It certainly goes around the world. I know, if I may be forgiven for name dropping now, I know that it has gone around the world because the Duke of Edinburgh told me. I'm a great admirer of the Duke of Edinburgh. When I was a Member of Parliament, if ever I was faced with a question I couldn't think of the answer to, I always thought, what would the Duke of Edinburgh say? And I said that, which may explain why I lost my seat by such a wide margin. But the Duke of Edinburgh told me that he actually went to Tonga, and in the late 1950s, on Britannia, he was doing a sort of cruise of the world, and he found himself with all the royal dignitaries of Tonga. And to sort of break the ice, he looked around this group of people and said to them, which of you were the lunch? And a little man in the corner put up his hand, I was lunch, I was lunch. So certainly somebody believes, well, that they were the person in front of the Queen of Tonga. But do we know that Coward actually said it? There's a famous story connected with this theatre where Bonnie Langford was appearing in a musical version of Gone with the Wind. I won't tell the totality of the story because it's rather vulgar. And Coward is reported to have made some remark about what should have been done with the child when the horse came on. Now, what is interesting is that Bonnie Langford, who's a friend of mine and is lovely, used to be upset by this story. She felt it had damaged her career in some way, but now she's quite proud of the association that Noel Coward even noticed her. The trouble is that I discovered that remark attributed to Noel Coward 10 years before Bonnie Langford appeared in the musical version at this theatre of Gone with the Wind, about another young actress in a show on Broadway. Did he say it then? So really what I'm asking you, because you are the authorities on Coward in the world, I'm asking you please to send me through home chat, I'm asking you to send me your favourite Coward anecdote, culled from one of his biographies or from stories told by any of the people who might have known him, from Michael McLearmore through to John Gielgud, whoever they may be. Please send it to me if it can be authenticated, but not just your favourite stories. Is there somebody putting a hand up at the back of the room?
It is I, Sam Stewart. I can verify the Coward story about what was written.
Oh, good.
Because I was told it by a man who was in the box beside him.
Oh.
A now deceased director called Michael Ashton.
Excellent.
Who was a great Coward fan and who directed the International Design for Living back in the early 70s. But he told me the story.
Excellent. Well, we hope you will move among us so we may touch your garb. This is very exciting. We will exchange email addresses later, and then we can give you, as it were, 1 degree of separation source of the story. And it's quite possible, of course, that he could have used the same line twice, because so that even becomes more interesting. First used, second used, and you come up with a witness. So there we are. So that's what I'm wanting. I'm wanting first-hand accounts from people like that, which will be wonderful. So thank you for your help. Now, let's turn to the business at hand. We are here celebrating not just a genius, but a delightful human being. And we see the genius everywhere. We see it just in our daily lives. I often think, when I was feeling this week, I was thinking about I'd done something stupid and I thought, oh, I feel an idiot. And then I thought to myself, nothing lasts. And then in my head came the words from, is it brief encounter, nothing lasts, neither happiness nor despair, not even life itself lasts very long. And I thought this man has an ability to touch the human heart as well as make us all laugh. And to have done that over so many years with such effortless charm. And yes, occasionally to have been waspish, but I don't think ever to have been cruel at the expense of somebody who couldn't take it. Waspish humour, but a good heart. It's a wonderful thing to have. And to create work that has stood the test of time. It won't surprise us in this room, but out there are people who can't believe it. It turns out that we were right after all. Terence Rattigan and Noel Coward are the two great playwrights of the 20th century. It's amazing. I know it annoys Bernard Shaw, and Arnold Wesker is now turning in his grave, but that's the way it is. That's what history is telling us already. And those of you who are lucky enough to see Home Chat, I know it's the title of your journal, but who saw Home Chat this year at the Finborough will know that even the plays we didn't know turn out to be completely wonderful. The reason I think that play didn't go as far as it might have done, all to do with rows with Madge Titheridge. I got this at first hand too because I knew Peter Titheridge, Madge Titheridge's son. But now I'm getting on to tongue twisters, which we must get out of. You remember the people, they hissed when Gladys Cooper's sister appeared. Do you know this story? Gladys Cooper's sister appeared at a play down the road at the Duchess Theatre, and her sister was her dresser, and was allowed occasionally to come on as the maid, but she gave up doing it because she came on at one performance. She was called Cissy Cooper. She came on at one performance as the maid the first night, and she thought people were hissing her. They weren't hissing her. They were just muttering to one another, "That's Cissy Cooper, Gladys Cooper's sister, Cissy Cooper, Gladys Cooper's sister." Enough silly stories. The reason that we are here is to salute the master. And we celebrate him this particular year because he just goes on giving pleasure. His plays go on being produced. We want to see more movies. We want to see, I hope in the fullness of time, Firefly restored, because it's, if any of you have been, you'll know it's in a rather sad state at the moment. It's a bit windswept. It's fascinating to go because if you look in the cupboard, the toothpaste is still there in the glass. I mean, literally, shirts are still hanging in the wardrobe. It's fascinating, but it does need a little bit of TLC. So here we are. I'm glad he's got the cigarette because, well, actually, if he hadn't had the cigarette, he might have lived a little bit longer. There's no photograph that I've ever seen of him after the age of 14 in which he isn't holding a cigarette. Completely extraordinary. But to have given such pleasure is marvellous. This man had more than a talent to amuse. He had a talent to actually touch the human heart and lift the human spirit. Are these flowers here? Can we please all together now give a standing ovation to the shade of the man who was never in the shade, but is our hero and friend, Noel Coward.